Hey everyone, welcome to Studio Z. I'm Pete, and in this video, I'm building a bedroom storage bench that is made to sit at the foot of your bed. It has a flip up top and a storage area under the seat. It's made for holding pillows, blankets. It's a great addition to any bedroom. In the first video, part 1, I will be focusing solely on the build of the project. In part 2, I will be focusing on the staining and the finishing. This bench will be made out of rift-sawn white oak, which is straight-grained white oak. And now let's take a look at the material. So here we have the material that's going to be used for the top, or the lid, the part that you sit on. This particular board is going to be the actual top, and these two boards will comprise the underside of it, which would be like the inside of the box, the part that you don't see. So these are going to be for the underside, and this one will be the top. Again, everything is mainly rift-sawn white oak. As you can see, it's all really straight grain, top and bottom. And these two parts will be glued together to make up an 1.5 inch thick top that will then be edge banded on all sides. Here I have the same thing, rift-sawn white oak. That will be, these are going to make the slats for the lower bottom shelf, the part that's closest to the floor. It'll be all cut up, but that will be the lower shelves at the bottom of the rack. This particular panel here will be the, it'll make the parts for the box, the storage box that goes under the lid. And this will be the very bottom of the box, the part unseen, that whatever you put inside will rest on top of that. Okay, so I just want to go over how I break down sheets of plywood again. I had it in another video, but in case you missed it, I'll go over it again. So what I use is obviously the Makita track saw, and the saw slides back and forth on this track. And I also have a guide on it that I clamp on and off depending on what I'm doing with it, and that's this guide. And this guide is set at a perfect 90 degree to the track, and I can make perfect 90 degree cuts for cross cutting. What I do is I put these foam boards underneath this plywood, and I basically, you can see it there, it's sandwiched underneath all of the pieces, okay? And what I do is, this foam board is sacrificial, so I basically cut into it. I set up the saw so that I have one underneath the cut. This way the pieces don't move once they're separated, and it gives you really nice, clean cuts. You don't get any tear out or anything like that. It's absolutely fantastic. So this is the method I use for cross-cutting, and I generally do it depending on the lengths of the boards. I'll even do the finish cut with this as well in cross-cutting if they're really long. Lengthwise, going the long way, I will generally rough cut it to that size, and then I will finish it on the table saw. It's just easier to handle longer lengths that way as well. So let me set this up and I will show you how I cross-cut the pieces. And that's all there is to it. And I'll show you a close-up of what a really good, clean, brand new blade can do as far as getting perfectly clean, no tear out on the cut. Now I'm cross-cutting the underside of the top. Okay, so now that I've rough cut the parts, For the top, I will run them long ways through the table saw to get the edges a lot cleaner. So now I've set up the table saw to rip the underside parts for the top, just to kind of clean up the edges a bit. They have some chips and stuff from the outside factory edge, and I just want to make one really true straight line down so that when I seam the two boards together for the underside, it has a nice tight seam on it. Okay, so what I've done is I've mocked up the underside of the top, the lid of the storage bench. And I did this purposely. I made most of this piece out of scrap plywood that I had left over from other projects that was still really good. And I wanted to do this, it's on the underside of the top, so you're not gonna see it, but I purposely put together two pieces of wood to show you how to join two pieces of plywood. I use it for, oversized tables where a sheet of plywood doesn't cover, the size that you need. Sometimes you have to join it. And I wanted to show you my method for how I join plywood. And what I'm gonna do now, and I'm gonna show you, is I'm gonna cut a dado on both sides of the boards. It's gonna be 3/4 of an inch deep, 1/4 of an inch wide, and I'm going to then make a tenon, which will be 1.5 inches wide and 1/4 inch thick, that will hold the two boards together perfectly flat on the top, and it'll keep them from moving, and it will be the entire length of the piece. I know a lot of guys use biscuit joiners for this. I do not use biscuit joiners at all. They have no place in my shop as far as for me. I either use the Festool dominoes for tables, but for joining plywood, there is no better way to me than to do it in this method, where you cut a dado and you make a long strip, and this way the entire piece is held in parallel with the top so that it's completely flush and flat. So let me show you now how I go about making the dados. So I thought this would be a good time to explain to everyone who doesn't know what a dado blade is. And if you're new to woodworking and you're unfamiliar with it, or you have been in woodworking and you do know what they are, I figured I'd explain it anyway, and this way it's easier to understand. So a dado set is a stacked blade system where you start with the outside blades, and you can add different middle or intermediate blades to create a blade, in essence, that can be anywhere from 1/4 of an inch thick all the way up to 7/8 of an inch wide. And you can create large rabbets, or we call them dados. Whoops, that's backwards. And basically, by stacking the blades together, I'm just going to put a few in here, you can now create a blade that is much thicker, and will carve out a gully, let's call it, and rather than making multiple passes with a little 1/8 inch blade, this you can make one quick pass through it, and it's great for cabinets, for plywood, things like that, where you need to join two together and you need a rabbet. It also comes with micro shims, so you can very, very finely adjust the width of it down to 1/1000th of an inch, and dial in for today's plywoods, which generally are never 3/4 of an inch. And from one company to another, you have to keep playing around, to figure out the thickness. These shims will help you do that, and comes with a chart as well, so you know how many to put in. And it's basically a trial and error thing where you dial that thickness setting in. So that's dados for you. And also, when you're using the dado blade, my saw has a riving knife in the back, which most saws today have. You have to remove the riving knife. You can't use it with the dado blade. So I just wanted everyone to be aware of that. All right, so I'm back. We've finished making the dados, and I've already gone ahead. Well, I have a pre-cut stock of these splines that I make when I'm joining plywood. It's an 1.5 inches wide and about 1/4 inch thick, and to whatever length I cut them for each project. But I just wanted to go back over so what we did here, which is I cut the 1/4 inch dado, okay, on either side of the board that I'm joining together, and that spline is going to go in between them, as I'm going to show you right now, just to give you an idea of how this system works. And it works, like I said, really well. Depending on how you cut the spline, how tight you get it to fit in there, it'll also dictate how well this joint goes together. And so as you can see, I've left it sticking out just so you get an idea. And once it's clamped together and glued, you cannot feel the difference between the two. It is absolutely perfectly flat and flush. And it's a great way to join plywood. And for this particular project, I didn't go ahead and try to match the grain or anything like that. Again, it's on the underside, it's not going to be seen. But when you're doing a table or something like that, I would then of course pick the grain from the same sheet or something like that, so that it's virtually invisible. I mean, you can't even tell that you join the two pieces together. I've done this many times for large coffee tables and things like that, and it usually ends up invisible, that you can't see it. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and glue this together and show you how that goes. So I'm going to start by gluing the spline in on one side of the board that's going to be joined on the top, and then I'm just going to set it aside while I put the glue on the main piece that it's going to go onto. So I just want to get it liberally in there, not too much, because we don't want too much of a buildup in there. So, okay. All right, so once that's in like that, I'm just going to leave that and set it aside. It just saves me a little more time, because when you're working with this glue, you have about 10 minutes to get the pieces together, and it can get quite nerve-wracking, as far as time is concerned. So it's best to do all of the prep that you can beforehand, and it makes your life that much more less stressful when you're trying to glue things up. So what I use is I spread the glue out liberally, and then I use a foam roller to spread it out evenly and get a nice uniform coat on one side. So I'll show you how that goes. It's going to take, initially the roller is going to absorb some of the glue, so you end up having to put more down as well, At this point, there's no pressure. You haven't joined anything together yet, so the clock hasn't started ticking yet, so there's no stress. All right, so I'm gonna need more, but I'm just gonna start to show you what this is gonna look like. And this top piece is oversized, you know, all around. So once I get everything joined together, then I will cut it to the final size. So I have some wiggle room, you know, around the edges, things like that. And I'll explain why when we get to the edge banding part, which will be, you know, after this has set up and dried. Okay, so now that I've got all the glue spread out, I'm going to put one of the panels that already has the spline on it. I'm going to lay it on top, and that should be okay. All right, and then I'm going to apply glue now to this side of it, and this one I'll put a little more liberally because I want it to get on the spline, and I'm also going to glue up the edge so that they are glued together as well. You get a nice tight seam. Okay. Then what I will do is I will clamp the pieces together so we get a nice tight seam. And then I'll go around and clamp them together so that it's a nice, you know, sandwiched tight all the way around. This will help me lock it in so that they don't slide around on each other. And one more in the middle, and it should be good. This one might need one more. There's a little hairline gap, so I'm gonna put another one in here. Wow, that's good, perfect. All right. And I like to wipe up any excess glue on the joint just to make it easier or later on. These veneers on plywood today is so thin that you can barely sand it, you know, without blowing through it. So I like to minimize that as much as possible. You can see it's absolutely flush. There is nothing that you can't even feel that the two boards are joined together. All right, so now I've got a lot of clamps to put around the edges. So I think that is it for this glue up. I will come back once it has dried up and we'll be ready to size it up to its final size. All right, so we're back and I've removed all the clamps. The glue has fully cured. So I just wanted to take a close-up and show you just how tight that seam is where I joined the plywood, and how good it can come out if if done this way. That it's completely flat. You cannot feel any kind of a bump or anything. It's completely seamless. So it's a great way to, again, join plywood. So now I'm going to flip the piece over. Like I said, this is oversized, and so now I'm going to finalize it to its final dimensions. And I'll again use the track saw to do that on one side, parallel in a long ways, and then I'll cross cut it with it and finish with the table saw. I have the track saw set up now, and I'm just going to rip one side long ways to initialize a reference line that's perfectly straight. So now that I have a perfectly straight and flush cut on this side, the long side, I can use it as a reference point to set up for cross-cutting, and I can set my guide up against it. So I have a reference point again that's perfectly straight, and I can make a perfect 90-degree cut going across on one end. It's also worth noting that I cut the piece upside down, and the reason for that is the circular saw cuts like this. The blade spins upward. So if there's going to be any tear out, it's going to be up on the top of the surface. And again, this is the underside. So if anything does happen, some kind of tear out, it would happen on the bottom side and not on the face side. That will be the blade's coming up on it, so it's an upcut. It will not have any tear out on that side. So that's just something worth note. Now I'm going to rip the opposite side so that both sides are perfectly parallel. I'll use the table saw to cut this side, and then finally I will cross cut this end after that is done. Okay, so I'm back on the table saw, and I flipped the piece over now, so the good side is up. The table saw cuts on a downward motion, so the blade will be pushing into the surface, not lifting it up. So you want good side up. I have my width set up already. This is the side that I cut with the track saw. So now we're going to be cutting off this end. And we're back at the track saw. I'm going to finalize this one end, and that will be the final dimension for the top piece. Okay, so that's it for the top. It is completely sized to the finished size, and at this point it is ready for edge banding. Like I said, all of the edges going around will get an edge banding. Same white oak rift, which I will show a little later on. For right now, I'm going to go over and we're going to start working on roughing out the material for the legs. So we're back at my build table where I have the rough stock for the table legs. This particular piece that I had left over is already sized to thickness. It's 1 3/4 inches thick, which is what I ultimately want the legs to be square. But this is the other piece that I have, and I can only get 3 legs out of this one, so I need to get 1 more out of this guy. But here's the problem. They're not the same thickness. So what I'm going to do now is show you the planer and how I bring this board down to the same thickness as that one. And once we've done that, I'll joint the edges so that the edges are perfectly 90 degrees to the face, and then we can begin cutting the pieces for it. So we're now at the planer, and this will take a series of multiple passes to bring it down to size. This is just the first. This particular board had a little valley, like right here. That's what I'm also going to take out once I bring it down. This knot is not going to show. It'll be on the inside of the piece, so I'm not concerned about it. Pass, I'm just going to run a little skin pass, and I'm actually going to do both pieces so that they match completely. I'm now at the joiner, and I've planed the two faces, top and bottom, but it's time to get a straight edge on one of them so that we can then bring it to the table saw and cut it. So the trick here is to keep one of the faces, the back face, the front face, whichever it is, tight up against the fence here, and let the machine create the 90, which it already has, into it. And when you're feeding this through, you want to put most of the pressure at the outfeed table, never on the infeed table. That will make it kind of, if you did it the other way and you press on the back end of it, you'll end up with a bow in the board. Takes a little bit to learn how to use a joiner. It's a little tricky, but once you've figured it out, you can get some really nice straight cuts out of it. So here we go. As the board gets straighter and flatter, you'll hear the blades engage more. So whenever it misses, that's where it's not flat. There you go. I'm also going to clean up this other one. It was already done before, but I want to go back over it and make sure. Over to the table saw. All right, so we're back at the table saw, and I'm about to start ripping the table, the storage bench, the legs from the stock that I just planed and jointed. And I figured this is a good time to explain the types of blades that I use. I know I use the terms, and for you experienced woodworkers, this may, you may want to fast forward over this, but for the newcomers to woodworking, I thought this would be a good chance to explain to you the different types of blades that you should use when you're cutting it to get the most out of your cuts and to get the best cut quality. So since I'm ripping, in this scenario, really thick stock in solid wood, and this is going along the grain, so parallel to the grain, we use a ripping blade, which looks just like that. It has fewer teeth and very large gullets, which the gullets are these areas right here that allow the cut material to get expelled from the blade so it doesn't clog up or bind up. It's very fast cutting, and it's made for quick removal of material, and very easy to cut through the thick stock that you're using. It is not for cross cutting. It is only for ripping down the length with the grain of the blade. of the wood. And again, just for ripping. After that, we have the plywood blade that I was using before. So this is so in plywood you have the wood's going in both directions. It's both, you know, cross-cutting and ripping at the same time always because of the different layers. So I like to use, this is one of my favorite blades. It's the Freud Ultimate Plywood and Melamine blade, and you get excellent cuts out of it. I never get any tear out on the top or the bottom, and just a great all-around plywood blade, and that's this one here. Then for cross-cutting solid wood, I use this Freud Heavy Duty. It's a 60 tooth, and again, it is only for cross-cutting solid wood material that's really thick. You can cut up to, you know, 2 inch, 2.5 inch with this blade, and it cuts really, really well. Not for plywood, so you cannot use this for plywood. You will get tear out on it. It is not meant for that. It is only for solid wood. They have different teeth on it, and that is what makes the difference. So I just figured I'd touch on that. I know there's a lot of videos out there that explain this. I just figured for my own purposes I'd explain what I use when I'm cutting. So okay, and now I'm going to start ripping the blanks. Again, this is my jointed edge, nice and straight, so I have a great reference up against the fence. One board, nice and square. I also realized that at this point, while I have the setting already set up for the table legs, that it'd be a good time to rip the rails for the lower shelf that goes down by the floor. It's the same dimension as the legs, so this is a perfect time to rip that as well. Okay, now I'm going to set up the saw and start cross-cutting the legs to length. In addition to the dado blade, I also thought that it would be a good time to explain what the riving knife is. The riving knife basically looks like a shark's tail, and it follows the blade, the back of the blade. It's the same width as the blade, and as you raise or lower the blade, it goes down and up with it. It's a safety device that prevents when you're passing a board through the blade, the back of the blade is traveling in an upward direction. It's upward and at you, whereas the front of the blade is pointing, is traveling downward. So this is the safe side of the blade. This is the dangerous side of the blade. And what the riving knife does is it prevents the board that you're passing through from ever touching these teeth. Or if anything, it's just barely grazing them, but it's never really engaged in them. And that prevents the board that you're passing through from getting kicked up, you know, by the blade and thrown at your face or whatever it is behind you. This is a very necessary piece that's, you know, recently been introduced in all table saws, and it's vital to safety. I have mine is adjustable, and I have mine set up so that it exerts a side pressure into the fence, so that as I'm passing the board through, it's constantly pushing it into the fence, and it's acting like a spring, and it keeps the board from touching the back of the fence. However, I will note that when I'm doing cross cutting, especially like on a sled, or if I'm using the miter gauge, I will take this off, however, and that is only because it will interfere with cross cutting. It'll actually skew the board, and you don't want that. But when I do take this off for cross cutting, and note, this is very important, I do not use the fence, because you cannot take the riving knife off and do a cross cut using the fence. It is very dangerous. I would not want anyone to do that. So make sure that you note that. If you take this off for cross cutting, never ever use the fence to go through. It is strictly for an open cut that you use either a sled or the miter gauge, so that there's no danger of the board getting bound up between the fence and not having the riving knife to protect you from the back of the blade. So I have now set up the table saw with my solid wood cross-cutting blade. I've left the riving knife in just because I'm not going to be going through the whole blade, so I will never get near it. What I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to true up one end of each leg, and that'll be a reference point then, that when I flip it around, I'll have a guide on the fence, and then we can get them all ripped, all cross-cut to the same length. Okay, so now I'm going to set up my stop on the fence so that we can accurately cut each one. So I've gone ahead now and set up the table saw with I have basically a guide block up against the fence that I will rest the piece against, and I get accurate cuts. The reason I use this is so that again, when you're cross-cutting, you don't want to get bound up between the fence and the blade. That is when you get kicked back, and it's very dangerous. This way, with this block set up, I have 3/4 of an inch of a gap from the fence, so that once I pass through, make the cut, I can slide the piece back, and I'm never touching the blade. It's a safe way to do cross-cutting. And again, because I'm not passing through the blade, I don't need to remove the riving knife. I will never get near it. Okay, so I've now set up the table saw with the plywood blade, and I'm going to start cutting the parts for the box, basically, that is the storage box that'll be under the lid. And this will have 4 parts to it, so it'll be the front and the back long pieces and 2 short sides. So I'm going to cut 3 pieces from this. 2 will be the long one, and then the remaining one I'll split and make the two side pieces for it. It's also worth noting that they're being cut to the exact width but their length is still oversized, so I have to still cross-cut them. I thought about it, and before I change the blade, this is a good time to cut the lower shelf slats that'll be going on the lower shelf down by the floor. I have the blade set up, so it's just a good time to do it. They'll be rough sized, and then later on I will cut them to exact size. I'm also going to cut the bottom of the storage box as well while I still have the blade set up. I will cut it to the exact width, but I will not yet cut it to the length. I'm now going to go back to the parts that I cut before, which are going to make up the box, so the front and back of the box and the two sides, and I'm going to cut them to their correct length at this point. Same as before, like I did with the legs, I'm going to true up one end, and then I will go to the guide that I have on the fence and cut them there. I've removed the riving knife for this operation because I have to pass completely through the blade. So again, same rules apply as before, I won't be using the actual fence. I'll be cutting off of a guide block that I have so that I have a gap and everything is safe. Okay, so now I'm going to set up the correct length and begin the cross cuts to the final size. I have the stop block set up, so now I can start cutting these front and back rails. And now we'll move on to the dados. And now I'm going to cross cut the bottom shelf panels, the three panels that sit at the bottom closest to the floor. And now one final trim to width on these lower shelves. Okay, so all the pieces have been cut, and right now I thought it'd be a good time to explain how I join my parts together, what I use for joinery. And what I use is I use the Festool domino. And this is what a domino looks like. It's just a little piece of wood, and the machine, that's the machine, the Festool domino. It's basically like a router that spins, and it also oscillates back and forth, and it creates an oval slot in the wood to accept the domino. And you cut that slot on both sides of the pieces that you're trying to join. So you have one side and you have the other. And the way that it works is that you cut one side of the slots, or on one part of it, you cut the slots tight. The machine has two settings. It has a tight setting and a loose setting. And in the tight setting, there's no gap for the domino to fit. It fits tight in the slot as you see it. On the other corresponding slot, it's oversized. So the domino has some room in there to slide back and forth so you can adjust the joint once you've put it together. And the way that it works is that you know, depending on how many dominoes you want to put on your joint, you initially make your mark on one side, you know, however spacing you want it to be, and then you match up that spacing on the corresponding piece. And then you just adjust your depth to whatever height you're looking to achieve. And once you know you've glued these up and put them together, the fit is, you know, absolutely perfect and really, really tight. There's no gap in there, you know, and they're super, super strong. So, and they're really, really fast to do together. You know, I did all of these pieces, which is about, let me think, I think it's about 16 or so dominoes, something like that. It might be more. And I did this in like 20 minutes, you know, to drill out all of these slots for them. So just wanted to go over that for those of you that don't know how the domino system works. It's an expensive machine, but believe me, the time that you save to, you know, in doing it and having maybe done it the traditional way or with biscuit joints, which are, again, in my opinion, they're worthless, this can't be beat. It's just maximum efficiency. Okay, so we're at the bandsaw, and right now I'm going to notch the corners of the bottom of the storage box. So this is the bottom of it, and I need to knock out the corners, so that they will fit around the posts, the legs on the inside of the box. I've put blue tape on it because on one of the cuts I have to flip it over, and to avoid tear out, I'm going to use the tape to, you know, kind of keep that to a minimum. But I've set up a stop block that is 3/4 of an inch back from the front of the blade, and the fence is 3/4 of an inch from the outside of the blade. So it'll take out a perfect 3/4 inch cube, which will then fit around the posts. right, so we're on day 2 of the build, and I figured I'd start out today by showing you guys how I edge band plywood. And I don't have one of those really expensive edge banding machines that's solely dedicated to doing edge banding. I do it the old school way, and that involves an iron, and I trim my pieces with a flush trim bit on my trim router. So let me get that set up, and then I will now show you all the parts, and I'll explain even what edge banding is if you don't understand what it is, and see my process. So these are all the pieces that I have to edge band. There's the lid, the rails that make up the box, the bottom shelves, and so all the edges have to be edge banded. And I figured I'd show you, I have, just like I said, I have a dedicated iron that I just use for edge banding. And I also have a trim router, which I have set up with a flush trim bit to trim off the excess after it's been glued on. So I also want to just show you what edge banding is. It's simply, veneered oak that has heat sensitive glue sprayed onto the back of it, and when you put it onto the piece with the iron, it heats up the glue, melts it, and then it sticks permanently to whatever plywood edge or wood edge that you're putting it on. And it can be removed afterward. Again, if you heated it back up, you can take it back off, say you make a mistake or something like that. So it's easy to work with, and just a great way to edge plywood and make it look like it's a real board. All right, so let me show you my process, how I do. I'm going to demonstrate it on one piece. I'm not going to show you all of them. It's going to take me a good part of the day to do these. So at least you'll get the idea of how I go about edge banding. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've pre-cut all of my edge banding, so I have it for all the parts. And the edge banding is a little longer than the pieces that I need, and the reason for that is that once you've glued it on, you'll then trim it off with the flush trim router. So I've got my iron already preheated, and I'm pretty much ready to go. I like to lay my edge banding already out flat on the surface. It's easier to work with, and I just take the hot iron and I start at one spot, and you heat it up. Making sure to press on the edges, especially to make sure that they adhere properly. And I do about 6 inches at first, and I make sure that that's fully adhered. I check it, and then I let that cool a little bit so that the rest of the piece won't move as I'm going through the remainder of it, and this ensures that it won't slide or move around as I'm going down the remainder of the edge. I like to keep a consistent pressure on it and a consistent speed as well to make sure that the glue is fully getting heated and you have even, consistent bonding. And then I usually go back just to make sure that I push the edges to make sure that they're sealed. And I use my fingers as well as I'm going. I put my fingers on the edges to feel it and make sure that I'm not going crooked or something like that. And you can make sure that you have the right overhang on both sides so that you'll be able to remove it afterward. All right, so I've gone ahead and done 2 sides of the piece, and I just want to show you what it looks like. Like the overhang that you get, you can see the edge banding there sticking proud of the edge. That's what's got to be cut off. And also on the top, I don't know if the camera will get it, but there's a little tiny lip going around the edge where it's overhanging, and that's got to be trimmed off as well. So I do that with the trim router, and I like to do I like to do 2 sides at one time. You can't do more than that because you have to trim as you go. But it also gives one edge a chance to cool down a bit before you trim it, because you can't trim it when the glue is still kind of gummy. It will make a mess. It makes a mess anyway, but that way it gets a little harder and easier to work with to trim it off. I also wanted to note too that the edge banding comes in various widths, everything from 7/8 of an inch, generally, for 3/4 inch plywood, all the way on up to, I think I have some that are like 4 inches wide. So you can get it in multiple species of wood, every kind of oak, maple, birch. They even have walnut and some of the laminates like whites, and I think you can get different colors too. I don't dabble in those as much, mostly only just the woods. But there's a great variety in edge banding, and it's a good way to to finish off an edge on plywood and make it look like real wood. All right, so now I'm going to show you how I go about trimming it off. And that's really all there is to it. It's pretty simple. I finish it off in the sanding process. I'll use a fine sandpaper to ease the edge and get rid of any glue that might have come up, from this, because it does happen. But it's nice and flush and ready to go. So I'm back and I've finished edge banding the lid, and I just wanted to show you, what you can expect from the edge banding. And I've gone ahead and just slightly eased the edges. They were really sharp, so I hand sanded them very slightly with 120 grit sandpaper. Again, just showing you how you can transform a piece of plywood into something that looks like a board. And it's very simple, very easy to do. You don't need any fancy tools, just an iron and the edge banding, and you can create almost anything just from some simple tools. All right, so all the parts have been edge banded. Everything has been cut to size. I have all my clamps ready to go, dominoes, and everything is set and ready to be assembled. So let me show you how that goes. First I start with the dominoes, and I always put the domino in on the tight slot, not the loose slot. And that just makes it much easier for assembly. I'll do this for all of the parts that have, the domino that goes into a tight slot. When you're doing glue ups like this, it's always good to get done whatever you can first. Again, because of how fast the glue sets up, you don't have enough time, so it's best to get as much stuff done beforehand that you can. Okay, so at this point it's all clamped together, and a quick check of square diagonally, and it looks like, wow, it is right on, so it's perfect. So this will set now for about an hour, hour and a half. I'll probably leave it for 2 hours, and then I can take the clamps off, and I can start to work on the bottom shelves that will go into place, and the top as well. Okay, everyone, so this is the final build after it was completely assembled. I just wanted to illustrate what it looks like fully assembled. And I haven't put the hinges on yet, or the gas struts for the top when it opens. I'm going to do that after I do the finishing. And there are certain parts to it that I've only temporarily put on, so that when I do the staining and the finishing, because it's going to be two-tone, it's going to make it easier to do the staining and the finishing. So for example, the bottom shelves are only placed on, they're not firmly put in place. The trim going around the sides, that's also not fixed in position. It's only temporarily put on. And you'll see in the second part of the video why I did that when I do the staining and finishing. So let me just come back around, and I'll give you some close-ups of what it looks like in detail. So you can see I've got the moldings and stiles and rails on it. Now, I do want to mention, because I'm sure somebody's going to say, well, you did them wrong. No, I said that I've tried them both ways, and what I ended up deciding to doing is that I wanted the, when you open the lid, I wanted to make sure that you didn't see end grain from, the stile popping through the top. So I chose to put the rails fully across so that when you flip it open, you see, straight grain and not end grain. And I just like the way this looked better, versus putting the stile all the way through and then having the end grain pop up over here, and you see the joint. I just didn't think that that would look right. So, so that's why I did it that way. And yeah, so I just wanted to point out how it looks. Again, it's not sanded, so there's little scuff marks in the plywood as well. But I have yet to sand it, and so on and so forth. So so this is what it looks like finished, and yeah, stay tuned for the second part of the video where I do the staining and the finishing. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for this video, and please make sure that you check in on the second part 2, where I do the staining and the finishing. And be sure, if you like my content, to like and subscribe. Again, there's a little button down in the corner. Makes it easy to subscribe to the videos. And I've got, let's see, today, as you are watching this when it was released, the CNC router will be coming in 2 days. So I'll be posting a unboxing video and a setup video. That'll be all in one, in the first one. And that'll be coming probably towards the end of this week. And I've also got a really cool coffee table that I'll be making. That'll be coming up in about a week or two. So stay tuned for both of those. Until then, see ya.